to a strong and compassionate leader without peer, the Secretary of Defense, James N. Mattis. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Secretary Mattis.
Hey, thanks, everybody. I'm not going to go through the list of all the distinguished guests here this evening because I know that there is astonishment among all of us here tonight that I would be standing here in this position right now talking with you. I can guarantee you no one is more astonished than myself. But it is rejuvenating to be back in the company of people who raised me in the Marine Corps. So many role models and mentors here this evening. Who would have dreamed, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dunford, General Kelly, Chief of Staff to the White House, God bless you. Who would have believed when we took some poetic license and redesignated the 7,000 sailors and Marines of Regimental Combat Team 5 under then Colonel Dunford and redesignated them as the 5th Reconnaissance Regiment and sent them over the Tigris River to seize it when we were told to hold fast. We were just doing a reconnaissance, General Gray, I promise you. But who would have believed that day that we would be sitting where we are today? It's a reminder you can make your plans about life and God will laugh at you. I think too that in putting my words together, General Sheehan was guiding me, and I thought that since after dinner speech does not have to be, very long, that I'd just give a 2-hour quick summation of Clausewitz's theory of warfare, and then we'd get into the meat of it. And then I thought, I'm the only thing between you and the Commandant of the Marine Corps, I'd better not do that. First, I have to say to the Gold Star families that are here tonight, we don't forget. You have our respect, you have our love, and we know the memory of those you hold closest. As Lawrence Binion put it, at the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. And remembering is at the very heart of what the Heritage Foundation does for all of us here this evening. To our hosts, thank you for your tireless efforts as custodians of courage and for your mission to promulgate this legacy. There was a Greek poet I'm proud of referring to often, lived a couple thousand years ago, a guy named Pindar, who said, "Left unsung, even the noblest deed will die." And I think thanks to this stalwart organization, his words need not apply to the deeds of U.S. Marines, the deeds of generations of our soldiers of the sea, and they will not lie in the compost of history's events thanks to this organization. We're building a country here these days, and we have to remember that. It's work that's never finished, it's noble work, it's hard work, and it's never, ever finished. So to have something like this that holds the legacy of this national treasure, I believe is critical. The Lejeune Award itself, as we all know, is named for a Louisiana boy who fought his way into the Marine Corps. When John Lejeune requested transfer from the Naval Engineers, a Navy bureaucrat told him, quote, "You have altogether too many brains to be lost in the Marine Corps," unquote. As you know, General Sheehan, I never had that charge leveled against me. So it's humbling, truly humbling to receive the Luh-Jurn Award. I was a pretty average Marine, and people can think, well, there's false modesty. No, I have a very high regard for Marines. An average Marine is pretty magnificent, especially as Hemingway will tell us, when the chips are down, there's no one better to have around than a Marine, and he was a man who knew something about fighting. But I would tell you, too, that it's not false modesty, although I have a lot to be modest about. I was just at the right place at the right time repeatedly in my career. And there was any number of us in this very strong elite organization who could have done everything I did and probably did it even better, and they could be standing here tonight representing all of our values and do it just as well or better. I'm here only because I had extraordinary mentors from my first days in the Corps, extraordinary in every sense, and they were from the Vietnam generation, is the generation that raised me and taught so many of us of my generation to stand and to deliver when it was curtain time in hell, to close confidently and ferociously with the enemy, and to never abandon our fighting faith for the false security of pessimism or the false refuge of cynicism. We knew that attitude is the best weapon system we have in the Marine Corps. When our turn came and Marines of my time crossed the line of departure, we never feared one time the enemy. We only feared that we might somehow disappoint those of you who had gone before us and who had coached us. But thanks to the tough NCOs and the officers who raised us, the player coaches, each of those NCOs harder than petrified woodpecker lips, the issue was never in doubt. And with all gratitude, more gratitude than I can even muster the words to say, I will tell you that this honor cannot be presented to me. It can only be presented through me to the brighter stars in the constellation of our magnificent Corps. The Marine Corps forged us all who served alongside me. I felt it forging all of us as we went along. And any position I occupy today is the result of its training, its culture of excellence, and the habits I acquired in the company of warriors. Those who knew, as John Lejeune said, the true soldier's Elysian state is preparedness for war. For so many of us here, when fate tapped us on the shoulder, it did not find us unprepared. And that's a testimony to our elite, unconfused Marine Corps. Because of the Marine Corps, we knew that our sailors and Marines' spiritual strength was always our strongest weapon, that hardness, swagger, and confidence are appropriate so long as we live this side of heaven. And then to quote General Lejeune again, there is no substitute for the spiritual in war. Unquenchable courage and unquenchable determination crush out fear, and death becomes preferable to defeat or dishonor. For Marines are undistracted in their purpose to fight and win the nation's wars. A great strength of the Marine Corps over the decades has been this lack of institutional confusion in our Corps. It's a tradition passed down over generations of soldiers of the sea, and today's leaders of our Marine Corps hold the Corps in usufruct. And I'm always careful never to drink before I say that word. It's spelled U-S-U-F-R-U-C-T. It comes, the first time I found it in American literature, is written by Thomas Jefferson. Basically, it comes from an agricultural point of view. Some people in farming industry say you can change the course of the streams on your land, you cut the trees down, you can plant crops, you can do whatever you want. You must turn it over to your son or daughter in as good a shape or better than you received it. And that is the charge for every Marine leader today. I would tell you that our lack of institutional confusion, knowing that we must fight well and win, is what guides our decisions, and you proudly raised me in that tradition. So today, ladies and gentlemen, the charge to the Department of Defense is that every policy we have, everything we do, will be designed to increase the lethality of our military, because we are not deserving, simply because we were born Americans, of victory on the battlefield. We're going to have to earn it. And we're going to need the same ferocity in our warriors that we heard about tonight on Tarawa. We're going to need that same ferocity in the future. For this experiment in democracy to long endure, it will require the raw human spirit of those who seek out danger far from the well-lit avenues of life, Marines who are upright and not those who need to be kept upright, to quote Marcus Aurelius, ethical to the core of their being, fierce in the fight. It will require these young, high-quality volunteers who look past the hot political rhetoric and voluntarily sign a blank check to the American people payable with their lives. Those volunteers will come if we tell the story of what they can become. Courage, honor, and commitment will beckon to them. The Marine Corps Heritage Foundation tells this story, and in telling it, you not only preserve the legacy, you also ensure the future safety of our nation, our great big experiment in democracy. Tonight, we all salute an unconfused Marine Corps that does not tilt with every fad, that recognizes a democracy, even a progressive liberal democracy in the classic sense, needs defenders, needs a Corps with old-fashioned, even quaint values of ethics, of loyalty, of chivalry, and as well as being very, very tough fighters. A Corps that speaks with manly firmness, to quote our Declaration of Independence, manly firmness to power, and to quote others who say that whether on the battlefield against an enemy who thought by hurting us on 9/11 he could scare us and learned that we don't scare, or speaking on Capitol Hill with great respect to the Congress that has saved our Marine Corps decade in and decade out and through thick and thin, we remain true, recognizing that the auditor of us all is war, and it's a very tough auditor. It is a very exacting auditor, and we know that we are going to have to survive that audit at some future fight. So I would just tell you tonight, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me stand here back among a family that I grew very proud of. I could have never believed the Marine Corps would allow me to serve so many years in your ranks, and I would not have changed one thing. I just wish I could do it all again. Thank you, and Semper Fidelis.
General Mattis, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for accepting the Lejeune Award. And most importantly, thank you for continuing your extraordinary service to our nation. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to introduce our military guest of honor, the 37th Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Robert, and as he told me last year, the B stands for Badass Neller, to share with you the state of our Corps.
Okay, so General Blackman, I promised him that I would come to this event every year, so this year I called him, I go, well who's going to be there? He goes, well, you get to follow the Secretary of Defense. And General Kelly will be there, and the chairman. I said, well, thank you so much. So welcome to our family reunion. It's great to see everybody, and it'd be difficult to follow the words of Secretary Mattis, because many of us have served with him, for him, and many of you in this room. Second Lieutenant Neller got briefed at 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines by Major Christmas in 1976. I used to run away from Colonel Sheehan. He actually, you got to put this tonight in context, because General Sheehan said, hey, you're doing a good job, kid. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me, sir. I was so excited. General Sheehan said a nice thing to me. He spoke to me, actually, civilly. But congratulations to all our awardees, and thanks to the sponsors and all the donors, the corporate sponsors, and all the people that made this. I mean, did you ever look up, just look at all the way up? Not at the airport. I mean, this place, this is just absolutely incredible. And you come in here and you see the faces and you read the words and you see your friends, and people come here and we have graduations in here, we have people commissionings in here, people get married in here. I mean, this is our church. And I'm Chaplain Scott, I don't mean to be sacrilegious, but this is our place. And it was an idea of some very serious Marines many years ago, and through their hard work and their efforts and through their a lot of donations, it's come to pass. So thanks for coming tonight. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm glad to, I think you got here before the sun was still out, so you actually got to see the sunrise. There's some little sun out there, you and General Kelly and the chairman, and for you and your ladies, thanks for being here. So General Blackman's what I'm supposed to talk about what's going on in the Marine Corps. I mean, your Marine Corps is about 186,000, about 35,000 of those Marines are deployed. We're in every corner of the world, from Afghanistan to Iraq to Syria to Africa to Europe to the Pacific. As was mentioned, we've had our first operational deployment of F-35. We're back in Australia. We've already completed our recruiting for this year, and we're already starting to put them in the can for next year. So we've got money, we're hopeful we'll have a budget, but we're in a good place. We've got a lot of work to do. The Secretary is asking us some really hard questions, he and Secretary Spencer, because it's all about lethality, it's all about readiness. It's all about making ourselves ready to go to war and to give our diplomats that space so that we don't have to go to war. But we have to be prepared to go to war, and we're working hard to do that. What I would really like to talk about is, I think, two of our awardees tonight, Mr. Bowden and Mr. Shara's books. Because I think one is a historical account of the Battle of Way 50 years ago this past February. And I know General Christmas and General Downs are here. And I remember being Second Lieutenant Neller when Ernie Cheatham was my regimental commander. And you read that story, and there's a lot of similarities between Mr. Shara's book, The Coldest Hours, because they talk about the same things. They talk about the leaders, they talk about the commanders, they talk about O.P. Smith, and they talk about the decisions they had to make and the pressures on them and the things they had to stand up to make sure that that Marine force was ready to go and that they were successful in the fight. They also talk about the adversary, which is unusual that we spend a lot of time talking about the adversary, but we spend a lot of time in the Joint Staff and with OSD and with Secretary Mattis and Secretary Spencer talking about the adversary, because they get a vote. And these books lay out, I think, in a fascinating way, really what the Viet Cong and what the North Vietnamese were up to during Tet, and in the coldest hours, what the Chinese commander was dealing with. But I think the things that both of those books do that we have to remember every day, it talks about the rigor, the violence, the demands, the physical, the mental, the spiritual demands of combat. It tells you the story of what those Marines did at that time. And as Secretary Mattis says, it talks about what we who wear the uniform today have to measure up to, so that when our turn comes and our time comes, even though our time has been going on now for the last 17 years, and your Marines have acquitted themselves well. But we have to be ready for whatever that next fight is, knowing that it's going to be a tough fight, it's going to be a violent fight, it's going to test us to our absolute core, yet that we hope it won't ever happen. So we assess ourselves, we get ready, we anticipate, we change our training, we adjust to what we think is going to happen. We try to be prepared for whatever the eventuality comes our way so that we can bring as many of them home as possible and as many of our adversaries not. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you tonight. I promised I'd get us out of here by 2200. But we have one order of business. Last year we did this, and at the beginning of the ceremony, we had the Marine Color Guard here, and we played the national anthem, and then the Marines hymn was played by the quartet. But we did what Marines usually do. We stood at attention, and no one said a word. But I think before we leave tonight, because of this distinguished group, we need to sing the Marines hymn. So I would ask you to stand, all Marines. So for the San Diego folks here, or the West, help the Paris Island people with the words. Because I'm not sure they remember. No, they're just kidding. Just the first verse. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we will fight our country's battles in the air, on land and sea. First to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to claim the title of United States Marines. Hoorah! Everybody have a safe trip home. Thank you.